the dream of conquest. In the summer of 1812, the young United States turned its eyes northward. Britain was consumed by war with Napoleon in Europe, and many American politicians saw their chance. They believed Canada was ripe for the taking. A quick strike, a few glorious victories, and the entire northern frontier would fall. They thought Canadians would welcome them as liberators, tired of British rule. Instead, the War of 1812 became one of America's most frustrating and forgotten conflicts, a war filled with bold dreams, crushing defeats, and lessons that would shape two nations forever. 1. Why America went to war. To understand why America tried to invade Canada, we must start with the oceans. For years, Britain and France were locked in the Napoleonic Wars. Both sought to cripple the other's economy, seizing ships that traded with their enemy, including American vessels. The Royal Navy also began impressing U.S. sailors, capturing them and forcing them into British service. To Americans, it was an intolerable insult to their sovereignty. At home, frontier settlers accused Britain of arming and encouraging indigenous resistance, especially under the Shawnee leader Tecumseh, who dreamed of halting American expansion westward. By 1812, President James Madison and his war hawks believed war was inevitable, and perhaps even providential. They claimed conquering Canada would be a mere matter of marching. But what awaited them was no easy victory. It was disaster. 2. Unprepared for invasion. The United States was woefully unprepared. The regular army barely numbered 7,000 men, scattered across a vast frontier. The rest came from militias who refused to fight outside their home states. The officer corps was divided and inexperienced. Many veterans of the Revolution were gone, and younger commanders lacked unity or vision. Meanwhile, Britain's forces in Canada were smaller, but far better trained. They had experienced officers, disciplined troops, and a powerful navy that ruled the Great Lakes. And contrary to American expectations, Canadians did not rise up to join the invaders. Most English-speaking settlers remained loyal to Britain, and French Canadians feared annexation by the U.S. more than they resented London. From the start, the war was a clash between ambition and reality. 3. The Detroit debacle. The first American invasion came from Detroit under General William Hull, a Revolutionary War veteran. In July 1812, Hull crossed into Canada, expecting locals to welcome him. Instead, they stayed loyal to Britain. Facing him was Major General Isaac Brock, confident, clever, and allied with Tecumseh's warriors. Through cunning and psychological warfare, Brock spread rumors that thousands of indigenous fighters surrounded Detroit. Terrified of massacre, Hull surrendered without firing a shot. More than 2,000 Americans became prisoners. Detroit was lost. The defeat humiliated Washington. Newspapers mocked Hull as a coward. But for Britain and its indigenous allies, it was proof that courage and strategy could overcome numbers. 4. Queenston Heights and the death of a hero. The next invasion came across the Niagara River at Queenston Heights. American troops captured the heights early in battle, but when reinforcements were needed, state militias refused to cross, claiming they weren't required to fight outside U.S. soil. Isaac Brock led a bold counterattack and was fatally shot, becoming a national hero. His troops and indigenous allies recaptured the heights. Hundreds of Americans were taken prisoner. Once again, invasion turned to retreat. For Canadians, it was a moment of unity. For Americans, it was another painful lesson. Enthusiasm without discipline leads to ruin. 5. The war expands. By 1813, the war had spread along the Great Lakes. Control of the lakes meant control of supply routes. On Lake Erie, young Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry led the U.S. Navy to victory, declaring, "We have met the enemy and they are ours." That triumph allowed General William Henry Harrison to retake Detroit and pursue the British north. At the Battle of the Thames, Tecumseh was killed. a devastating blow to Indigenous unity. Without Tecumseh, the dream of a native confederation collapsed. For the US, the victory at the Thames was sweet revenge, but strategically shallow. Canada remained unconquered, its defenses stubborn, and its people unbroken. 6. The burning of York. In April 1813, American forces captured York, the capital of Upper Canada, today's Toronto. They looted the town, burned government buildings, and destroyed supplies. The attack infuriated Canadians and the British alike. The destruction of York would soon be avenged, in the most dramatic way possible. But even as US forces celebrated, they realized something troubling. Holding territory was nearly impossible. Long supply lines, harsh terrain, and fierce resistance turned every victory into a Pyrrhic one. 7. The tide turns. By 1814, the war had changed completely. Britain defeated Napoleon and could finally turn its attention westward. Thousands of experienced soldiers were shipped to Canada. On land, American invasions were repelled at battles like Lundy's Lane, one of the bloodiest fights of the war. At sea, British blockades strangled American trade. Then came revenge. In August 1814, British troops landed near Washington, D.C. They captured the city and burned the White House, the Capitol, and government buildings, retaliation for the destruction of York. President Madison fled the capital. The American dream of conquering Canada had turned into the nightmare of its own capital in flames. 8. The war's end. By late 1814, both nations were exhausted. The United States faced bankruptcy, public opposition, and military fatigue. Britain had achieved its defensive goals and saw little reason to continue. Peace negotiations began in Ghent, Belgium. On December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, restoring all borders to their pre-war status. No land changed hands. No nation truly won. Ironically, the most famous battle of the war, New Orleans, led by Andrew Jackson, took place 2 weeks after the treaty was signed. News traveled slowly, and men died for a war that was already over. Still, Jackson's victory turned him into a national hero, even as the war itself faded from public memory. 9. Why the US failed. So why did the US fail to conquer Canada? First, poor preparation. The American army was small, scattered, and inexperienced. Political divisions crippled coordination. Second, logistics. The frontier was vast and unforgiving, full of lakes, forests, and rivers that made transporting men and supplies painfully slow. Third, leadership. Commanders like Hull hesitated. Others like Dearborn and Wilkinson bungled their campaigns through miscommunication and ego. Fourth, Canadian resistance. Loyalists, French Canadians, and Indigenous warriors all fought fiercely to defend their land. Fifth, false assumptions. The US expected Canadians to defect. Instead, they rallied to defend their homes. And finally, Britain's navy. Superior British control of the seas and Great Lakes allowed them to reinforce and resupply their positions far better than the Americans could. The invasion failed not from lack of courage, but from lack of unity, planning, and respect for their opponent. 10. The aftermath. Though the war ended in stalemate, its consequences were profound. For Canada, it was a defining victory. Loyalists and French Canadians discovered a shared sense of identity, a feeling that they had defended their land together. For Britain, the war confirmed the value of its northern colonies and secured its hold over them. For Indigenous nations, it was a tragedy. With Tecumseh gone and Britain's withdrawal, native confederations lost their strongest ally. American expansion westward resumed at full force, and for the United States, the war brought both humiliation and pride. The dream of conquering Canada was gone, but the nation emerged more unified, its military stronger, and its identity more secure. It also produced enduring symbols. The Star-Spangled Banner, written as Fort McHenry, withstood British bombardment, and heroes like Andrew Jackson and Oliver Perry, who would shape future generations. The forgotten war that defined two nations. The War of 1812 is often forgotten, overshadowed by the Revolution and the Civil War, but it shaped the destiny of North America. The United States learned that patriotism cannot replace preparation. Canada learned that resistance can create unity. And Britain learned that even far from home, its empire could endure. The Americans marched north to conquer a neighbor, and instead helped forge that neighbor's nationhood. Two countries, born of the same empire, tested each other in war, and emerged forever changed. The borders stayed the same, but the world around them did not. If you found this story fascinating, like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Questions channel, where we explore the civilizations, ideas, and mysteries that shaped humanity. If you found this story fascinating, like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Questions channel, where we explore the civilizations, ideas, and mysteries that shaped humanity.